Remember when a glossy Los Angeles law firm made America fall in love with billable hours? From 1986 to 1994, LA law turned depositions, divorces, and courtroom theatrics into must-see Thursday night television. It looked slick, glamorous, and perfectly controlled, or at least that's what it looked like on screen. Today we're counting down 15 weird and wonderful facts about LA law. We're talking a real breast cancer diagnosis hidden in plain sight, a sex move that became a national punchline, and a death scene so famous it got a shout-out on Star Trek. And trust us, you are not ready for what's near the top of this list. So, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with a friend who still argues about the Venus butterfly. Now, let's get into the countdown with number 15. Number 15. The show was born out of getting fired. L.A. Law only exists because Steven Bochco got pushed out of Hill Street Blues, the very drama that made his reputation after its 5th season, reportedly at the direction of the studio's then president. Rather than sulk about it, Bochco teamed up with Terry Louise Fisher, a former entertainment lawyer turned novelist and Cagney and Lacey writer, who actually knew what real courtrooms looked like from the inside. Together, they built McKenzie, Brackman, Cheney, and Cusack, a fictional firm that mixed Bochco's ensemble instincts with Fisher's insider legal knowledge and pitched it as something sharper and glossier than anything airing at the time. But here's where it gets ironic. The show that eventually replaced LA Law in NBC's prized Thursday night slot was ER, meaning the series born from Bochco losing one hit show would later get bumped off the air by a completely different medical hit. Sounds harmless, right? Not exactly, because LA Law had actually inherited that same Thursday slot from Hill Street Blues in the first place. So the time slot that made Bochco famous, then fired him in spirit, then rewarded him again, eventually turned around and did it one more time. Hollywood's memory is short, but its scheduling grudges apparently last forever. Over its 8 seasons, LA Law racked up 172 episodes and became a permanent fixture of NBC's must-see TV Thursday lineup, the very same block that later carried Seinfeld and Friends, which means the series that emerged from Bochco's firing essentially helped build the scheduling philosophy that defined an entire decade of network television. And, in a strange bit of full-circle irony, Bochco didn't just walk away from Hill Street Blues empty-handed either. He went on to sign one of the largest producing deals in television history, a 10-series arrangement worth roughly $50 million, this time with ABC, which meant the man his old studio had effectively let go ended up becoming one of the most powerful showrunners in the entire industry within just a few short years. Number 14. The sets cost more than most people's houses. LA Law wasn't shot on some cheap soundstage with folding tables and a gavel prop. The production built 3 separate sets, including an exact courtroom replica complete with a working elevator and a removable jury box for camera access. So directors could shoot from angles a real courtroom would never allow. The law office itself had plugged in desktop computers, polished terrazzo floors, and imported Italian furniture, because apparently nothing says credible legal drama like European design catalogs and marble that never scuffs. All in, the studio spent more than $1 million just getting the physical spaces to look convincingly expensive, back when $1 million in set design was practically unheard of for a network drama. And what makes it even funnier is that the wardrobe budget wasn't cheap either, since the entire show was essentially a 2-hour advertisement for power suits and shoulder pads every single week. Executives wanted viewers to believe these lawyers were swimming in fees, and the easiest way to sell that fantasy was to spend real money making the fake law firm look richer than most actual law firms. That detail would come back to define the whole show's aesthetic, turning LA Law into required viewing for anyone who wanted to see what successful attorney was supposed to look like in the late 1980s. Real practicing lawyers reportedly toured the sets out of sheer curiosity, and more than a few admitted their own actual offices looked embarrassingly plain by comparison, which is a strange kind of compliment for a show built entirely on plywood, paint, and imported furniture. Set decorators reportedly sourced pieces from actual high-end Los Angeles-designed showrooms rather than typical studio prop houses, meaning some of the furniture dressing the fictional conference room genuinely cost as much as it looked like it did, blurring the line between prop and investment piece in a way few other network dramas ever bothered attempting. Number 13. The theme song started with a slammed car trunk. Composer Mike Post, who had already worked with Boschko on Hill Street Blues and would later write the iconic Law and Order theme, got a very specific instruction for the L.A. Law opening. Boschko told him he wanted the sequence to begin with the sound of a car trunk slamming shut. Not a gavel, not a phone ringing, not dramatic strings swelling over a skyline shot. A trunk. Post took that oddly specific note and built an entire theme around it, turning a mundane sound effect into the sonic signature of prestige legal drama for 8 straight seasons of network television. Turns out, that trunk slam wasn't just a gimmick either. It set the tone for a show obsessed with the gap between polished surfaces and the messy reality underneath, which is basically the entire premise of L.A. Law, summarized in one percussive noise before a single line of dialogue was even spoken. Believe it or not, decades later, television historians and composers still point to that opening as one of the most recognizable theme sequences of the entire era. All because one producer had a very strong opinion about car trunks. Post's resume already included themes for The Rockford Files and The A-Team by that point, so composing a legal drama's opening felt almost routine to him. Yet the L.A. Law theme still stands out as one of his most quietly influential pieces of work, precisely because it refused to sound like typical courtroom drama music at all. Post would go on to score dozens of other primetime hits over his career, but he later admitted in interviews that the specificity of Boschko's directions on projects like L.A. Law made his job simultaneously harder and more interesting. Since he wasn't just writing background music, he was translating a producer's very literal image of a slamming trunk into something that had to work as a weekly emotional cue for millions of viewers. Number 12. Harry Hamlin turned a hungry mistake into a running gag. During the pilot's very first conference room scene, Hamlin, playing Michael Cusack, reached over and pulled a sandwich toward himself without thinking twice about it. The food on set was strictly meant as background dressing, never intended to actually be eaten on camera by the actors. But Hamlin picked it up anyway while they were shooting his last bit of the scene, ended up with his mouth full mid-take, and just went with it instead of stopping. In the next conference scene, there happened to be a plate of croissants sitting there, and Hamlin thought, why not make this a permanent thing? So he did. From that point forward, he ate in nearly every single conference room scene of the entire series, whether the script called for it or not. What makes it even stranger is that the prop department noticed and started treating it as an ongoing inside joke, quietly making sure there was always something edible within Hamlin's reach during boardroom scenes. On camera, it looked like a busy lawyer grabbing lunch between crises. Off camera, it was one actor's improvised hunger accidentally becoming a permanent piece of the show's visual language, all because nobody told him to put the sandwich down. Years later, cast and crew interviews still bring up the running gag as one of the more affectionate memories from the production, a small piece of proof that even a show this polished couldn't entirely script away the occasional, spontaneous, hungry human moment. Hamlin himself has told the story publicly more than once over the years, always with a mix of embarrassment and pride, and it's since become one of those trivia details fans bring up specifically because it makes an actor known for playing a buttoned-up, disciplined attorney seem refreshingly human and a little bit ridiculous at the same time. That's 5 down and 10 to go, and honestly, the reveals only get stranger from here. If you're enjoying these behind-the-scenes stories, do us a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments which fact has surprised you the most so far. Alright, let's get back to the countdown with number 11. Number 11. The show almost died in its original time slot. When L.A. Law premiered, NBC didn't hand it the golden Thursday night slot right away. It launched on Fridays at 10 p.m., airing right after Miami Vice, a pairing that sounds stylish on paper, but struggled badly in the actual ratings week after week. Friday night viewers, it turned out, were not exactly clamoring for 2 hours of pastel suits, followed by courtroom monologues about deposition strategy. The show floundered until NBC made the call to move it to Thursday at 10 p.m., taking over the exact slot being vacated by the declining Hill Street Blues as that series wound down. That single scheduling shift transformed LA Law's fortunes almost overnight, folding it into NBC's legendary must-see TV block, alongside some of the biggest hits of the era. And here's the twist nobody expected. A rare encore of the original 2-hour movie pilot aired on September 27, 1986, in the place of Saturday Night Live, an almost unheard-of move for a scripted rerun to bump SNL from its own time slot. So, yeah, the most unrealistic part of LA Law's early history wasn't the courtroom drama. It was somehow convincing NBC to briefly cancel Saturday Night Live just to air a rerun. Once settled into Thursdays, the show's ratings climbed steadily, eventually landing among the top 20 programs on television during its strongest seasons, proving that sometimes a struggling show doesn't need a rewrite, it just needs a completely different night of the week. Within just a couple of seasons on Thursdays, LA Law had transformed from a show NBC executives were reportedly nervous about canceling into one of the network's flagship dramas, regularly pulling in well over 15 million viewers a week and anchoring an entire night of programming that advertisers specifically paid premium rates to be part of. Number 10. The license plates were a secret calendar. If you paid close attention to the opening credits, the car featured driving through Los Angeles carried a license plate that quietly told you exactly what season you were watching. Producers set the plate number to match the year the current season would end. So during the 1986 to 1987 season, the plate simply read 1987, updating every single year without fail. It's the kind of detail almost nobody consciously registered while watching, but it was there every single week, hiding in plain sight like a tiny production Easter egg tucked into the credits sequence. For the first 7 seasons, that plate rode on a Jaguar, reinforcing the whole fantasy of successful attorneys living large off other people's legal troubles. But by season 8, Arnie Becker's character had started dreaming about a Bentley Continental R, and when he finally received one as a gift within the show's storyline, the mystery plate transferred straight onto the Bentley for the remainder of the series. Turns out, even the cars on LA Law had character arcs, quietly upgrading right alongside the lawyers driving them, one increasingly expensive vehicle at a time. Fans who eventually noticed the detail decades later, thanks to freeze frames and DVD rewatches, treated it like a discovered secret, even though it had been sitting there in plain view since the very first episode aired back in September of 1986. It's a small reminder that even a heavily produced network drama, built around million-dollar sets and imported furniture, still had room for a tiny handmade joke that only the most obsessive viewers would ever actually catch. It's also a surprisingly practical bit of continuity work, since a show running 8 seasons and dealing with constantly shifting timelines and character arcs needed some quiet way to anchor each episode to a specific point in its own fictional calendar, and apparently nobody on the production team thought a spoken line of dialogue was necessary, when a license plate could do the job silently instead. Number 9. One of the co-creators got pushed out and sued. Terry Louise Fisher didn't just help build LA Law from scratch, she brought the legal authenticity and the feminist workplace lens that made the show feel different from anything else airing on network television at the time. But that partnership didn't last very long at all. Fisher was fired from the series during season 2, and what followed wasn't quiet or polite in the slightest. She filed a well-publicized lawsuit against Bachko and the studio, airing creative and financial disputes that had reportedly been simmering behind the scenes for months. The case eventually ended in a settlement, but by then, the damage to that particular creative partnership was already done for good. And here's what makes it even messier. Despite the very public falling out, Bachko and Fisher had still managed to co-create another show together in 1987, the John Ritter comedy Hooperman for ABC, meaning these two were simultaneously suing each other over one hit show while still professionally connected through another project entirely. That detail would come back to haunt the writer's room for years, as later seasons cycled through an almost dizzying rotation of new showrunners trying to fill the gap Fisher left behind. It's a strange footnote for a show remembered as glossy and aspirational, given that one of its 2 founding creators was essentially written out of her own creation before the series had even finished its 2nd year on the air. Fisher continued working in television and publishing novels afterward, but she rarely spoke publicly about the LA law fallout in detail, leaving most of what's known about the dispute to court filings and secondhand accounts from people who were actually in the writer's room at the time. Number 8. A lead actress was fighting cancer during filming. Shortly after wrapping the pilot episode, Jill Eikenberry, who played sharp litigator Ann Kelsey, was diagnosed with breast cancer, news that arrived just as the show was gearing up for its first full season. Her husband, co-star Michael Tucker, who played her on-screen husband Stuart Markowitz, immediately went to Bochco and told him they were planning to walk away from the show entirely because of her diagnosis and treatment schedule. This was not a small ask, and it could have ended both of their careers on the series before it even began. Bochco could have easily recast the role and moved on without missing a beat, the way most productions would. Instead, he assured the couple that Eikenberry would be released from set by 5 p.m. every single day so she could get to UCLA in time for her radiation treatments. On camera, audiences were watching a confident, composed attorney handle high-stakes cases without breaking a sweat. Off camera, the actress playing her was quietly leaving set each afternoon to fight for her life. Eikenberry beat the cancer, stayed with the show for its entire 8-season run, and to this day rarely gets asked about just how close LA. Law came to losing one of its stars before the series had even really begun. Tucker later wrote openly about the experience, describing it as one of the defining moments of both his marriage and his career, a reminder that behind even the most polished network drama, real families were quietly navigating real crises between takes. What's especially striking is that none of this ever leaked into tabloid coverage at the time the way it likely would today, meaning millions of weekly viewers spent years watching Eikenberry deliver confident closing arguments with absolutely no idea what she was privately going through just hours before each taping. Number 7. The most beloved character won real advocacy awards. Larry Drake played Benny Stolwich, the firm's developmentally disabled mailroom clerk, starting midway through season 1 and becoming a full-time regular the year after that. It would have been easy for a network drama in the late 1980s to reduce a character like Benny to a cheap punchline or a background prop wheeled in for comic relief. Instead, the writers built entire emotional arcs around him, covering everything from grief after his mother's death to his fight for independence and his right to work, vote, marry, and fall in love like anyone else. Drake's performance was so carefully calibrated that he won 2 consecutive Primetime Emmy Awards for the role, an unusual achievement for a supporting character on a crowded ensemble show. But here's the part that really surprised people. Drake wasn't just winning industry trophies for good ratings. He received an official commendation from a national association representing people with intellectual disabilities, and he was invited to speak publicly as an unofficial spokesman for the community, something almost no actor playing a supporting drama role ever experiences in their career. And no, that wasn't an accident. Drake had spent years studying the role before playing it, determined not to turn Benny into a stereotype, and audiences and advocates alike noticed the difference immediately. He later admitted in interviews that he genuinely liked the character on a personal level, a small detail that seems to explain why Benny came across as so warm and lived in rather than performative, week after week, for nearly the entire run of the show. Before landing the role, Drake had mostly been cast as intimidating or menacing characters throughout his career, so playing someone gentle, vulnerable, and repeatedly underestimated by everyone around him marked a genuine reinvention, one that ended up defining the rest of his professional life far more than any villain role ever had. Number 6. The cast was more connected off-screen than anyone realized. Stephen Bochco's own sister, actress Joanna Frank, was married to Alan Rachins, the actor who played uptight managing partner Douglas Brackman Jr. throughout the entire 8-season run of the series. Frank even appeared on the show herself in a recurring role, playing Brackman's on-screen wife Sheila, meaning she was essentially playing a fictionalized version of her own real marriage while her actual brother ran the whole production behind the camera. What makes it even stranger is how normal this apparently felt on set, given how many other real-life connections quietly overlapped throughout the show's run without much fanfare at all. Meanwhile, Eikenberry and Tucker, playing on-screen spouses Ann and Stuart, were also genuinely married in real life, a pairing so convincing that many viewers assume the show simply cast an existing couple purely for chemistry, rather than realizing just how many personal relationships were tangled into the professional ones. Behind every polished conference room scene, there was an unusually tight web of real families, real marriages, and one showrunner who was quite literally working alongside his own brother-in-law every single day at the office. It's the kind of overlapping family tree you would expect from a small theater company, not a glossy primetime network drama pulling in over 15 million viewers a week during its peak. Yet somehow nobody involved seemed to think it was particularly unusual at the time. Producers occasionally leaned into these real-life connections for casting decisions elsewhere in the show as well, recurring guest roles and smaller parts frequently going to actors who already had some existing relationship with the cast or crew, which slowly turned the LA Law production into something closer to a tight-knit repertory company than a typical rotating network drama crew. Alright, we've made it to the top 5, and this is where things get genuinely wild. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, now's a great time, because the next 5 facts are the ones people argue about most in the comments. Let's keep going with number 5. Number 5. Nearly the entire cast walked out at once. By season 5, most of the original ensemble's contracts were coming up for renewal at the same time, and instead of quietly re-signing like the network expected, several major stars decided they were simply done with the show. Harry Hamlin, Jimmy Smits, and Michelle Green all chose to leave, and the writers scrambled to explain their sudden simultaneous departures by having their characters split off dramatically to start a rival law firm across town. Susan Day nearly joined them in walking away too, publicly announcing she was leaving before quietly changing her mind and staying on for another season instead. Sounds harmless, right? Not exactly, because the mass exodus triggered years of chaos behind the scenes, with executive producer David E. Kelly leaving around the same time, and a rotating cast of new showrunners cycling through trying to steady the ship. Day eventually did leave for good in 1992, and true to form, her exit was written by simply bringing Jimmy Smits back for one guest appearance to wrap up her storyline neatly. That detail would come back to haunt the show's ratings for years. As critics generally agree, the mass departure marked the exact moment LA Law started drifting away from what had made it a genuine phenomenon in the first place. 3 new actors were brought in to fill the sudden gaps almost overnight. And while the show technically limped on for 3 more seasons afterward, longtime fans generally consider Season 5 the last true run of the original, beloved ensemble everyone had fallen in love with. Blair Underwood, who had joined the cast back in Season 2 as ambitious associate Jonathan Rollins, became one of the few remaining bridges between the original ensemble and the newer additions, quietly anchoring the firm through years of cast turnover that would have sunk a less established show entirely. Number 4. One episode title became a permanent piece of pop culture slang. In the show's 9th episode, tax attorney Stuart Markowitz wins over litigator Ann Kelsey, using a mysterious, never fully explained bedroom technique known only as the Venus butterfly. Bachko reportedly pitched the idea to Jill Eikenberry over the phone late one night while she happened to be visiting her mother back in Wisconsin, and it was Terry Louise Fisher who actually sat down and wrote the scene into the finished script. The move itself was deliberately left vague on screen, which somehow made it even more famous, because audiences spent years afterwards speculating wildly about exactly what it involved and never got a straight answer. And here's the twist nobody saw coming. The episode ended up winning Bachko and Fisher an Emmy for outstanding writing in a drama series, meaning a running joke about a mysterious sex move became one of the most critically honored episodes of the entire 8-season series. Turns out the phrase escaped the show entirely and became a genuine piece of American slang, still referenced decades later in movies, talk shows, and casual conversation by people who have never watched a single episode of LA Law in their lives. What makes it even funnier is that the show's writers never actually revealed the specifics on screen, which means an entire cultural catchphrase was built almost entirely on collective imagination, rather than anything the audience actually saw happen. Decades later, other TV shows and even news outlets have referenced the phrase in passing, usually assuming their audience already understands the joke, which is a fairly remarkable afterlife for a 2-word phrase invented for one single episode of a legal drama nearly 40 years ago. Number 3. A single kiss made advertisers pull their commercials. In a Season 5 episode, characters Abby Perkins and C.J. Lamb shared a brief but unmistakably romantic kiss outside a restaurant, marking what's widely recognized as the first kiss between two women on a primetime American series. Actress Michelle Green later admitted the moment was largely conceived as a sweep stunt designed to boost ratings rather than part of some deeper planned storyline exploring the characters' relationship over time. But intentional stunt or not, the reaction from viewers and the industry was immediate and very real. Several advertisers were so uncomfortable with the scene that they pulled their commercials from the episode entirely, refusing to have their brand associated with it in any way. NBC didn't back down or apologize for airing it, though. Instead, the network simply replaced the pulled ads with others so the show wouldn't lose any actual revenue over the growing controversy. What makes it even funnier in hindsight is that despite all the outrage and headlines it generated, the relationship between the two characters barely continued afterward, meaning one of the most historically significant moments in television history technically existed inside a storyline that mostly went nowhere at all. Even so, television historians still cite that single scene when discussing the slow, uneven road toward LGBTQ representation on American network television, proof that a moment doesn't have to be handled perfectly to end up mattering decades later. The episode itself was actually built around several unrelated storylines that week, meaning the kiss technically happened almost in passing rather than as the headline plot. And yet it's the moment that outlasted almost everything else from that particular hour of television in the cultural memory. Number 2. A death scene got referenced in an entirely different franchise years later. Diana Muldaur joined the show as Ruthless senior partner Rosalind Shays, a character executive producer, David E. Kelley, deliberately designed to be finite from the very start, since he didn't want her to ever soften or lose her edge over time like other long-running characters. Muldaur claimed she had no idea her character was about to be killed off until she actually read the script for the episode itself, despite Kelley previously warning her in passing that the role wouldn't last forever on the show. Shays met her end by falling to her death down an open elevator shaft, a moment so shocking and so widely talked about that it was later ranked the 38th greatest moment in television history by a national magazine poll. But here's where it gets genuinely bizarre. Muldaur had actually played Dr. Catherine Pulaski on Star Trek, The Next Generation, a couple of years earlier, and the official Star Trek encyclopedia actually included a joke tucked into her character's biography, insisting, quote, "There is no truth to the rumor that an ancestor of Dr. Pulaski was killed, falling down an elevator shaft at a prestigious Los Angeles law firm. None at all." It's a strange, almost accidental crossover between two completely different television universes, one built on courtroom drama and the other on outer space, connected forever by a single actress and one very memorable elevator shaft. Muldaur herself later joked that the reference followed her around for years afterward, proof that sometimes a single dramatic death scene can outlive an entire show and quietly become part of a completely unrelated franchise's mythology. Kelley, who wrote the character's exit, went on to become one of the most successful legal drama creators in television history in his own right, eventually building shows like Ally McBeal and Boston Legal, which means the same writer who orchestrated Shays' fall down that elevator shaft would go on to reshape the entire courtroom drama genre for the next 2 decades. Number 1. Real lawyers built their entire careers around watching it every week. L.A. Law didn't just entertain audiences on Thursday nights, it fundamentally reshaped how everyday Americans understood what lawyers actually did for a living behind closed doors. The New York Times once called it television's most serious attempt to portray American law and the people who practice it, and that reputation stuck with the show for its entire run. One New York attorney was famously quoted saying any lawyer who doesn't watch L.A. Law the night before heading to trial is a fool, treating a network drama as genuine professional preparation for the courtroom. Applications to law schools reportedly spiked during the show's peak years, with an entire generation crediting glossy Thursday nights at Mackenzie, Brackman for their decision to pursue a legal career in the first place. And that's what makes the show's ending so quietly poetic in hindsight. After 8 seasons, multiple Emmy wins for Outstanding Drama Series, and a legacy that outlasted most of its own cast members' involvement, L.A. Law was eventually replaced in its own prize time slot by a rising medical drama called E.R. The show that convinced a generation to become lawyers got bumped off the air by a show that convinced the next one to become doctors instead. And somehow, that feels like the perfect final scene for a series built entirely on the idea that even the most successful people eventually get replaced by someone newer, hungrier, and better lit for prime time. Jimmy Smits went on to headline NYPD Blue. John Spencer eventually joined The West Wing, and several other cast members quietly became fixtures of prestige television for years afterward. Proof that whatever L.A. Law actually was behind the scenes, it also functioned as one of the most effective launching pads in the history of American network drama. And there you have it, 15 wild and surprising facts about L.A. Law. Which one shocked you the most? And which ones did we miss? Drop it in the comments because we always love hearing from you. And if you want more deep dives into the stars, shows, and stories that defined an entire era of television, make sure to subscribe and stick around. We've got plenty more where this came from.